What's been a challenging week in American foreign policy. Over the weekend, new provocations from North Korea as Kim Jong-un personally oversaw the country's most significant military tests in over a year, launching a barrage of projectiles into the Sea of Japan. And while the U.S. has yet to confirm the type of projectile tested, the move raises questions about Kim Jong-un's willingness to negotiate a nuclear deal with President Trump. And here in this hemisphere, a failed uprising in Venezuela. The Trump administration recognized Venezuela's interim president, opposition leader Juan Guaido, over 3 months ago and has actively encouraged Guaido's challenge to President Nicolas Maduro, this week urging members of Maduro's inner circle to defect. But after Guaido's call for a military uprising, Maduro is still in power. Let's get right to it all with Secretary of State Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
Jonathan, it's great to be with you this morning.
So let's start with North Korea. What have we learned about what exactly, what kind of projectiles the North Koreans were testing?
So we know a couple things. One, at no point was there ever any international boundary crossed. That is, they landed in the water east of North Korea and didn't present a threat to the United States or to South Korea or Japan. We know that they were relatively short range. And beyond that, we know they weren't intercontinental ballistic missiles either. And beyond that, I'll leave the Department of Defense to characterize this when the further information arrives.
So you're one of the precious few Americans that's actually spent time with Kim Jong-un. You arguably know him better than any other American. What's your read on this? What kind of message was he sending with these tests?
Well, Jonathan, we still believe that there's an opportunity to get a negotiated outcome where we get fully verified denuclearization. Chairman Kim has repeated that. He's repeated that quite recently, in fact. And so we hope that this act that he took over the weekend won't get in the way. We want to get back at the table. We want to continue to have these conversations. The sanctions, the global sanctions put in place by the UN Security Council, they're still in place. And so the pressure on Chairman Kim to continue down this path, to achieve the outcome that everyone wants. You have to remember, this attack took place, or these launches took place just after he met with Vladimir Putin.
Right.
And so clearly, Chairman Kim has not yet been able to get precisely what he wanted, but we hope that we can get back to the table and find the path forward. We're further along than we were a year ago, and we hope we can continue to make progress.
Kim's clearly frustrated by the fact that he hasn't gotten anything back yet from the United States. As you mentioned, the sanctions are still in place. And he's now set this deadline of the end of the year to basically for the U.S. to show flexibility. Do you take that deadline seriously?
Look, this is a serious situation for sure, and we've known that the path to fully verified denuclearization would be a bumpy and long one. As for the deadline, we want to get back and begin to have these conversations. I don't know that there's anything particularly significant about his statement at the end of the year. We're watching closely the North Korean behavior, as are our allies, Japan and South Korea in the region. We still believe there's a path forward.
It was reported after the Hanoi summit that the president had reached out to Kim. There had been communications to the North Koreans. Have we heard anything back? Has the president heard back anything from Chairman Kim?
I don't want to get to the exact nature of the communications that took place, but yes, we've communicated with North Koreans post-Hanoi, and we hope that they can become, in the coming weeks, become even more robust communications where we can really have conversations about how the path will move forward.
So you have heard back, though?
Oh, yes.
So the president had this response on Twitter to the tests. It was a little different in tone than yours. He said, "I believe Kim Jong-un fully realizes the great economic potential of North Korea and will do nothing to interfere or end it. He also knows that I am with him and does not want to break his promise to me. Deal will happen." Why is the president so optimistic about getting a deal with Kim Jong-un?
Jonathan, that doesn't sound any different from what I've said here this morning. I too believe that there's a path forward, that we can achieve this outcome. Look, there was a UN report that came out on Friday. 50% of the North Korean population at risk of significant malnutrition. That is, it's a very difficult set of conditions there. We want a brighter future. That's why the president continually talks about this. It's important. They need to understand that if these nuclear weapons go away, it will be of an enormous benefit to their country, and keeping them just continues to pose risk.
You mentioned the famine. Is the U.S. considering any steps to maybe lift sanctions to get humanitarian support in? Anything to deal with that famine, which is supposed to be the worst in a long, long time?
So you'll recall, Jonathan, that it's permissible for humanitarian assistance. That is, the sanctions permit the North Koreans to purchase food products. That's why when I see things like happened on Friday night, where the money could have gone to taking care of his own people, it's so unfortunate.
There were reports out of the region that after the Hanoi summit, several of the people that you were negotiating with, that were part of that negotiating team in Hanoi, were executed. Do we believe those reports are accurate?
Jonathan, I don't have anything to add to that for you this morning.
But there seems to have been some kind of a shakeup of his team over there.
It does appear that the next time we have serious conversations that my counterpart will be someone else, but we don't know that for sure. Just as President Trump gets to decide who his negotiators will be, Chairman Kim will get to make his own decisions about who he asks to have these conversations.
I want to play you something that Cindy Warmbier had to say. She's obviously the mother of Otto Warmbier, who died after being imprisoned in North Korea. She made an emotional appeal to keep up the pressure. Take a listen.
North Korea, to me, is a cancer on the earth. There's a charade going on right now. It's called diplomacy. How can you have diplomacy with someone that never tells the truth?
So from everything that you have observed here, I mean, do you really think that Kim Jong-un is negotiating in good faith?
Well, first of all, I've come to know the Warmbier family, and Cindy in particular is an American warrior. She's a noble, wonderful, gracious woman, and so the tone in her voice, the sound in her voice, I have enormous sympathy for. Make no mistake, the United States continues to apply pressure. The UN sanctions are continued to be enforced. We're expending a lot of energy to do that. We think it's simply important that we play out every diplomatic opportunity, every opportunity we have to have these nuclear weapons depart and verify that without the use of force. We think every effort ought to be made in that, and we continue to work towards that.
But go back to the president's tweet responding to these tests. The line that stuck out to me was, he says, "I'm with him. I'm with him." That's what he's saying about Kim Jong-un. You just heard what Cindy Warmbier had to say about Kim Jong-un. He's one of the most brutal dictators in the world.
This is a president.
How does the president say, "I'm with him"?
This is a president who has put on the toughest sanctions in the history of the world against North Korea. The president understands the challenges. The president deeply understands this. And we are working towards finding a path forward with Chairman Kim to denuclearize this country diplomatically. You'll recall the beginning of the administration where the president spoke about fire and fury. We understand all of the challenges. We know who the North Koreans are, and we're working to see if there's a possibility. Before we go another direction, we want to see if there's any possibility we can achieve this outcome. It's very straightforward.
Okay, let's turn to Venezuela. National Security Advisor John Bolton suggested earlier this week that Maduro was about to fall, openly called for members of Maduro's inner circle to defect. But opposition leader Juan Guaido acknowledged yesterday that he miscalculated the level of support that he thought he had within the Venezuelan military. Was this an intelligence failure for the United States?
Oh, no, not at all. This is the Venezuelan people attempting to reestablish their democracy. The United States has joined with them. We've supported the National Assembly's choice. Juan Guaido is the interim president of the country. And as you know, these things sometimes have bumpy roads, to be sure, but Maduro can't feel good. He's ruling for the moment, but he can't govern. There is enormous poverty, enormous starvation, sick children that can't get medicine, Jonathan. This is not someone who can be part of Venezuela's future, and whether that change takes place today or tomorrow or a week from now, one can't predict. Our mission is to work with a large coalition, now 50 countries plus, who are determined to restore democracy and then ultimately a productive economy to Venezuela.
You said today, tomorrow, or a week from now. So you're saying this is imminent?
Could be 2 weeks, could be 4 weeks.
It's not going to be 2 months, not going to be a year?
What we can do is provide support, get support from the Organization of American States, the Lima Group, the entire region that understands that restoring democracy for the Venezuelan people is an imperative, and get them all to work together so that we get the outcome we're looking for.
Would Maduro still be in power if he didn't have support from the Cubans and from the Russians?
Without the Cubans, there'd be no possibility he was still in power. They are at the center of this. Indeed, it is the Cubans who are forming the security cordon for Maduro today. They're everywhere around him. He doesn't trust his military. You said the military hadn't come across. Well, the leader of their intelligence service, left. There's a lot. Maduro cannot feel good about the security of his position today, and he shouldn't, because the Venezuelan people will demand ultimately that he leave.
You said the Cubans, how about the Russians?
The Russians need to get out too. The president tweeted it very clearly. He said the Russians must go. We want every country. Iran is in there today. They need to leave as well. Every country that is interfering with the Venezuelan people's right to restore their own democracy needs to leave.
I want to play you what the president said about Vladimir Putin and what Putin told him about Venezuela.
He is not looking at all to get involved in Venezuela, other than he'd like to see something positive happen for Venezuela. And I feel the same way.
But wait a minute, what does he mean, the Russians, that Putin does not want to get involved in Venezuela? Aren't they already deeply involved in supporting Maduro?
The president has said that the Russians must get out. I'm going to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov in a couple of days. We'll have more conversations about this. The objective is very clear. We want the Iranians out. We want the Russians out. We want the Cubans out. That's ultimately what has to take place in order for Venezuelan democracy to be restored. It's very clear. I don't think anything the president said is inconsistent with that.
But wait a minute, you said that Maduro was on the plane ready to leave and to flee for Cuba, and it was the Russians that told him to stay. And the president is saying that Putin told him that he's not looking to get involved in Venezuela. Does the president not realize what you have said publicly and what is obvious, that Putin is deeply involved in Venezuela? I mean, what does he mean when he's saying he's not looking to get involved?
Yeah, I didn't see the full context of the quote there. I don't know what context that was said, and I do know this. The president has made clear we want everyone out, and that includes the Russians.
So you were at the Pentagon going over military options on Friday with the president's national security team. I know the line that you've said, the president said, everybody has said, all options are on the table. But is a U.S. military invasion of Venezuela really an option?
Oh, make no mistake, we have a full range of options that we're preparing for. That's part of what we were doing on Friday, was making sure that when this progresses and different situation arises, that the president has a full-scale set of options: diplomatic options, political options, options with our allies, and then ultimately a set of options that would involve use of U.S. military. We're preparing those for him so that when the situation arises, we're not flat-footed.
Does the president believe that he can intervene militarily without getting congressional authorization?
Yeah, I don't want to speak to that. The president has his full range of Article II authorities, and I'm very confident that any action we took in Venezuela would be lawful.
I want to get to another thing that the president mentioned about his call, hour-long call with Vladimir Putin. He said that he believes that Russia will not interfere in the 2020 elections. We heard, a different message from Bill Barr in his Senate testimony. We've heard concerns, obviously, from the intelligence community on this. Why does the president remain confident that Russia will not try to do it again?
I've been part of this administration for 2 years now. We have worked diligently to protect America's election system, something I wish the previous administration had done more effectively. We had pretty good success in 2018. The Department of Homeland Security has talked about that, and we continue to be very focused on that. Not only Russian interference. We don't want the North Koreans interfering in our elections. We don't want the Iranians. We want to protect and preserve our election system so that we can continue to have high confidence in the election outcomes that we get. We're determined. The president's done more on election interference than any previous president. We're very proud of what we've accomplished there, Jonathan.
The president seems to be suggesting that he's ready for a new kind of phase of his relationship with Putin now that the Mueller report is done. Are we going to see, there's been talk of a summit. Is there going to be a Trump-Putin summit on the horizon? And are we entering basically a new phase?
I hope we are. I'm going to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov. I'll then be traveling the week after that to continue the conversations. We truly do hope. We hope we can find places where we can have overlap in our interests. When I was a CIA director, we were able to do that. We worked with the Russians on counterterrorism to keep Americans who were traveling in the world a little bit safer, and frankly, help Russian citizens who were traveling the world to be a little bit safer too. I think it makes perfect sense that any place we can find where we have overlapping interests, we work along with the Russians.
At a summit?
I don't know. We'll see.
One more question before you go. I want to ask you about climate change. You said recently that climate change is not in the top 5 national security challenges facing the United States. We've heard the National Director of National Intelligence talk about climate change fueling competition for resources, economic distress, and social discontent. We've heard the Pentagon warn about climate change. Where do you put it? If it's not in the top 5 national security threats, where do you put it?
John, I can't rank it.
But what?
I can't tell you exactly which number. We want to make sure that all the outcomes that are possible, and that includes climatic change, that we are sure that our national security, as a Secretary of State, my job is to make sure our national security is never wavers, and that's what we'll do.
Because the Washington Post reported the State Department tried to strip any reference to climate change from the statement for the Arctic policy ahead of the summit you're going to be attending this week. What are you doing specifically to address this threat, or do you not take it particularly seriously?
Jonathan, this administration takes keeping Americans safe, keeping our drinking water pure, keeping our air clean very, very seriously. What the debate is about in this document you're referring to is about the Paris Climate Agreement. We don't think that that has any hope of being successful. We've seen it. We've seen America reduce its carbon footprint while the signatories, including China, haven't done theirs. To sign a piece of paper, Jonathan, is interesting and fun, and you get to cut a piece of ribbon and have a big photo op. But at the end of the day, the world's no safer. This administration is focused on doing the things that will allow our economy to grow. And you know this. Countries with high per capita GDP always have cleaner air, safer drinking water. It's a virtual certainty that health is improved for citizens around the world as economies grow. We're determined to do that. We hope other countries will follow our lead, and they too can have historic 50-year lows in their unemployment as well. These are the things that will keep Americans safe. It's what President Trump is focused on.
Secretary Pompeo, thank you for joining us here on This Week.
Great to be with you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.